Welcome back to the channel, everybody. Welcome back to Goomslayer's Fun Shotgun Corner. Today, we're going to be going over every single shotgun in Warzone and my best class for each. Now, keep in mind with what I'm about to show you, pay attention just to the shotgun build itself. Don't pay attention to the secondary or the perks or the lethal or anything like that. It's mainly just for the shotgun itself, okay? So just ignore the other stuff. But let's get into the shotguns, okay? And we're going to start off with my baby, the Gallo. The Gallo is incredibly strong. It is probably, in my opinion, better than the Streetsweeper because it has more damage over range. So it's a little more versatile, even though you don't have a statistically faster time to kill. Time to kill is not everything. It's about how you use the gun. But time to kill is important still, not downplaying that. But let's look at this particular build. So Agency Choke, not going to give you any more range. It's actually going to hurt your range just a little bit. That's something they still haven't really fixed. It just looks like it overall kind of hurts your range, but only by a small bit. If you look at the other suppressor, the sound suppressor, that actually hurts your range by a little bit more. I want to say like a meter or so, whereas the Agency Choke only hurts it by like 0.2 of a meter. So it's still a great attachment, even though it doesn't really give you any more range. It's just, I think it's a great attachment overall to run. Next, we're going to use the Reinforced Heavy because that is going to give you a faster fire rate, meaning a faster time to kill up close, but also more range, and actually has some pretty decent range to it. Now, if you watched my videos before on the Streetsweeper nerf, it actually caught a kind of a nerf for all the other Cold War shotguns as well, in that all of the barrels are kind of all over the place now. So the Ranger used to be the go-to for the most range, but now it's the Task Force barrel. And the Ranger, I think, is bugged because you're only getting like 6% more range, which is ridiculous. The Ember sighting point, a little laser, gives you more range than this big barrel. Doesn't make any sense, but the Reinforced Heavy barrel is the barrel of my choice. It's great overall for the Streetsweeper as well. But if you want more range, use the Task Force barrel. Now, for the lasers, usually the Ember sighting point is the way to go because he gives you the most range out of all these. Yes, you do have your flashlight visible to players. Yeah, it does slow your aim down sights time a little bit and your sprint to fire time, but it's still really good overall, and I think this is a great attachment to run. And then, no stock. Now, usually, I would say run the combat stock, but because of the recent nerf it got, it's just not as good. It's just unfortunately not as good as no stock to me anymore. I don't think it's really any competition now. It's still usable. It's still fun, but you're not going to be flying around the map like you're playing Doom or Quake, unfortunately. A lot of fun while it lasted, but man, no stock is probably the way to go. And then last, you always want to use the biggest attachment for magazines, usually that they have. 12 rounds is totally fine. Even though you reload a shell at a time, it's still really good. It's a little bit easier to use, I think, than the Streetsweeper's reload. But yeah, you always want to run the biggest magazine attachment you have, typically for these Cold War shotguns. Now, for the Streetsweeper, basically identical. It's basically the same attachments, Reinforced Heavy, Agency Choke, biggest mag, all that good stuff. Even after the nerf, which it really wasn't that big of a nerf, it's still an amazing shotgun. You're still going to get great time to kill values, great range, but past 10 meters, be warned, it's going to be a bit of a pea shooter. It's like the Jack 12, where that damage just drops off really fast. So be careful with that, but this is basically identical to the Gallo. So next up, we have the Hauer. This one is a little bit different. So I kitted this one out for range. If you notice, I'm actually using the Task Force barrel. Everything else is the same as the Gallo and Streetsweeper, but this time use the Task Force barrel. And the reason why, most range in class, and the Reinforced Heavy barrel, you don't really get too much fire rate with it. I think it's so minimal that you really can't even tell that much of a difference. So I really don't recommend it for this shotgun. It's unfortunate. If it was a lot faster, I would say go for it. But Task Force is your way to go first, I would say. And then as a secondary, you could use the Reinforced Heavy. That's still a good barrel. It's just not as good in my opinion. And this is a pretty fast firing pump action in my opinion anyway. So now we're going to dive into the Modern Warfare shotguns. For this one, we have the Model 680. And for this, I really recommend using Dragon's Breath. This is sort of a, not sleeper shotgun, it's just not a lot of people use it, right? The Model 680 on its own is kind of average. It's so slow, like to kill. The time to kill is ridiculously slow because it takes 2 shots at least. And most of the time it's going to take a third. It's just how it is. It's the nature of these guns in Warzone. But for this particular class, we're going to focus on range. And that is going to be with the Forge Tech Marauder and the Sport Barrel. Now, the thing to keep in mind is the Forge Tack Marauder doesn't say it, but it does lower your movement speed, so you have to be careful with that, especially if you're going to be using the Sport Barrel, which also hurts your movement speed, but this time it actually tells you, which is nice. But these two attachments in total give you close to 40% more range. It's really good setup for Warzone in particular. For multiplayer, different story. I think it's a little too slow. But then we have the 5 milliwatt laser, going to give us a nice sprint to fire speed bonus. Really great for shotguns. It also tightens that hip fire spread. And then Dragon's Breath. That's really going to make this thing work. It's okay without it, but Dragon's Breath just gives you more damage overall. I think it's a great attachment to run on this gun in particular. And then no stock kind of offsets the heaviness of the Forge Tack Marauder and the Sport Barrel. So that's my setup for the 680. This is what I always run in Warzone. It works pretty well. Then we're going to move on to the R90, and this is where things get a little unorthodox, if you want to say. So you'll notice I have slug rounds. Slug rounds are definitely hard to use, but if you're a decent player, you could probably make them work with a little bit of practice. But the thing I like about them is they give you a better 2-shot kill range than Dragon's Breath, and of course than the base rounds. They're just the strongest overall, but yes, they are difficult to manage at times. Dragon's Breath is just still too inconsistent, but this thing can pretty consistently 2-tap within 10 to 15 meters if you're aiming above, stomach and chest area. It can be really deadly, and it's really fun to 1-tap headshots up close. It's hilarious. But for this one, I'm going to use slug rounds, and then I'm also going to use the monolithic suppressor. That will weigh the gun down a little bit. The aim down sight speed will get hurt a tiny bit, but it does give you a slight bit more range, not too much. We're talking like, I don't know, 3-4%. It's really not much. Same as the choke. The choke actually helps with range by about the same amount, 4%. But we're also going to use the 5 milliwatt laser, great sprint to fire speed bonus, and the stippled grip tape, which is also going to give us a great sprint to fire bonus and aim down sights time as well. Now, if you wanted to run a sight, you can do that. I would just take off the stippled grip tape and put whatever, Viper Reflex sight or something. That's one of my favorites. And then I also run the Merc foregrip, and that's because with the slugs, accuracy is important, and the recoil on this can be pretty bad, especially if you shoot twice really fast, because it goes boom, 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 and you'll notice that it kind of flies up. So the second shot, you have to kind of pace your shots a little bit, and that's why this comes in handy. It's not going to be, insanely good. It's still a little bit difficult to control, but it helps. And you know what? You get some extra aim down sight speed, so I usually run this as well when I run slugs on this bad boy. So next up, we're going to check out the Origin, everybody's favorite spammy shotgun. Well, it used to be. So for this one, kitting it like the 680 where it's more focused on range, same as the Hauer, and that is why we're using the Forge Tack Impaler, the biggest barrel, great hip fire spread, and the monolithic suppressor, which just like the other shotguns, gives you like 4% more range, same as the choke. There's not really a Marauder suppressor to run on this, just the monolithic, so you don't get a huge bonus, but it helps, and it more importantly keeps you off the radar, which is why I use it mostly, over the choke at least. Then of course 5 milliwatt laser. No stock is going to help offset, again, the heaviness of the suppressor and the Impaler barrel. And then we have the 25 round drum mag, which, yeah, it's going to slow you down, but 25 rounds, it's awesome. This is one of those that you don't really need to aim down sights with as much, just kind of spray and have fun with it. It's still a really good shotgun. Still, I don't see people use it nearly did ever since the nerf, which I understand because it doesn't 2-shot anymore. It's always going to be at least a 3 against fully armored players, but it's still an amazing shotgun to run and still just really great overall. Better than the Jak 12 in my opinion, but don't tell any of the stat guys that because they love the Jak 12. Next up, we have the VLK Rogue. This is sort of a sleeper shotgun. Dragon's Breath is the secret here though, because otherwise this gun is kind of poopy. But when you have Dragon's Breath, it's insanely deadly, especially because it fires so fast. Now with this one, we're kitting it out for range for the most part. And you'll notice I don't have the biggest barrel. And the reason for it is because the Tsar, while it's a great barrel, really weighs you down again with movement speed and aim speed. And the bonus you get to range is pretty close to the Warlord barrel. So the Warlord barrel is just, a little bit behind the Tsar barrel, but you're not getting a movement speed, deficit or aim down sight speed. It's not going to be nearly as bad as the Tsar. So I really like the Warlord overall. And then the Forge Tack Marauder, it's just such a good attachment. For the shotguns that have it, it's just a no-brainer to me, and it keeps you off the radar, tons more range, and again, the Marauder gives you the most range out of any of the shotgun attachments there are, so for the shotguns that have it, usually it's a go-to attachment. And then, of course, we have 5 milliwatt laser, pretty much a given on all the Modern Warfare shotguns, and no stop, which is going to keep us flying around the map as quick as we can. Next up, we have the 725. Another unorthodox setup, I would say. For this one, I run the sawed-off barrel. While you do not get a large kill range like the other versions of the 725 or slugs with their crazy headshots, it boosts your max damage range. And in that max damage range, which is about like 4.5-ish meters, I believe, your consistent 2-tap is very consistent. I mean, you can have half your pellets hit and you'll still get a 2-tap. It's ridiculous and it's very solid. A lot of people don't run it, but this thing is pretty solid as a backup. The only problem is outside of that max damage range, it's going to be a 3-shot kill, which is really the hard part about this. But this is high risk, high reward. And in terms of buckshot shotguns, this is probably the most high risk, high reward of them all. And with all these attachments, you're going to be flying around the map. You are going to be so fast. You can aim down sights super quick. So with the sawed-off barrel, again, increases your max damage range, but cuts range overall. But it also gives you a consistent 2-tap, which is why it's so good. 5 milliwatt laser, again, amazing attachment for shotguns. Tempest Slim Grip helps with the 5 milliwatt laser. Also, sawed-off stock, kind of a no-brainer with this thing. I don't think there's really any point to running any other stock. And then last, you could use a suppressor. The reason I use a choke is it kind of offsets the crazy spread the sawed-off barrel has, but also a little bit tiny more range, and I just think it's a great attachment overall. But you could run the monolithic or the tac suppressor if you really wanted to. Then last, for all the shotguns, we have the JAK 12. And boy, I gotta come clean. I don't like this gun. I really don't. It just feels so clunky to me. But a lot of people swear by it. But you'll notice in my class setup, I don't have buckshot. I'm running slugs on this bad boy. Slugs are pretty great on this gun. You just have to be able to control them. They're not easy to use by any means. And they're definitely not as easy as buckshot or dragon's breath, but I think these are the most powerful way to run it if you can get past the muzzle velocity and the spread and all the quirks that slug rounds have to them. But yeah, slug rounds, amazing on this gun. 5 milliwatt laser again, stippled grip tape, both help with the sprint to fire speed, especially on this gun. That's kind of important because this one's so sluggish and it has a small open bolt delay. And then of course, Forge Tac Marauder, man, you know, this is the attachment for so many guns that have it. And you'll notice I'm not rocking a barrel. And the reason for that is because the Marauder and the slugs basically on their own give enough range as is. So there's no reason to really slow your aim down sights time with another barrel because you should be using this thing about 20 meters, 30 meters max. And there's just really no need for that barrel attachment. And then of course, this is a full auto shotgun. Recoil is going to be a little bit of an issue, especially since you have to be precise with this thing. So I generally run the Merc foregrip. If you want to run an optic, you could swap out the stippled grip with an optic. And I think that's a good trade-off. I would keep the Merc foregrip, but you could get rid of the stippled grip tape if you really choose to. And while we did cover all the shotguns, my bonus class for you guys is the 725 with slug rounds. This is something that caught on for a little bit. Some streamers were using it, but it kind of fell off the map and no one really knows about it anymore, it seems like. But it's basically identical to my other 725 class, but we're using slug rounds instead of the slim grip. Slug rounds on this thing have a basically infinite one-shot headshot range. It's seemingly certainly in any range you should be using this thing. It's hilarious. You only get 2 shots. This is another high risk, high reward, definitely very difficult to use well, especially as a primary. But man, if you nail those headshots at any range, it's so satisfying because they look at the kill cam and they see a sawed-off shotgun and they're like, what the hell is that? So much fun. And the choke, a little bit more useful with this particular build because with slugs, especially with the sawed-off barrel, your spread for the slugs, they veer off a little bit more than other guns. So the choke is going to help minimize that a little bit more, and it's really good. You could run a suppressor if you wanted to. I don't really recommend it so much with slugs. I would say use the choke overall. But guys, that is it. We just went over all the shotguns in Warzone. And I gotta say, I think my favorite out of all these, I would say probably the Gallo. The Gallo is still probably the most solid out of all the shotguns. A lot of people want to say that the Streetsweeper is the best. It totally is. I mean, it's maybe not exactly is the best, but it's still really top tier. I just prefer the Gallo. I really think the Gallo is a better shotgun overall because of the damage over range. Because the Streetsweeper and the JAK 12 specifically, man, past 10 meters, it's just marshmallows and potatoes galore. You're just not going to be doing any damage. It's rough. But the Gallo can still hold its own at that range, so I like it a lot because of that. But that'll just about do it for this video, guys. So let me know in the comments below, do you enjoy this type of video? Should I do this like every season after some nerfs and buffs? What's your favorite of these setups? Do you think I'm completely insane when I recommend using slugs on the Jack 12? And with all that being said and out of the way, guys, I want to wish you a happy day/night, and I'll see you in the next video.